If you're looking for one thing you can return to every day that quietly reshapes how you think, feel, and move through life, this is it. Not motivation, not pressure, just a steady reminder that brings you back to yourself. Watch this every day and you won't feel different all at once, but one day you'll realize your reactions are calmer, your choices clearer, and your life no longer feels like it's running you. There are moments when a single reminder, repeated daily, can quietly reshape the direction of your life. Not through force, motivation, or pressure, but through awareness. This is one of those reminders. If you watch this every day, not casually but intentionally, it will begin to shift how you think, how you respond, and how you carry yourself through the world. Change doesn't always start with action. Often it starts with what you allow your mind to return to consistently. Most lives don't change because people lack knowledge. They change because people forget what matters when life gets loud. Stress, habits, expectations, and distractions slowly pull attention outward until you're reacting instead of choosing. Watching this daily is not about learning something new. It's about recentering yourself before the day takes control of you. Repetition is powerful because the mind believes what it hears most often. When you repeatedly expose yourself to calm, grounded truth, your internal dialogue begins to soften. Fear loses volume. Urgency loosens its grip. You begin responding from clarity instead of emotion. This is how daily listening becomes daily alignment. At first, the impact may feel subtle. A pause before reacting, a deeper breath in moments of stress, a clearer sense of what deserves your energy and what doesn't. These shifts don't announce themselves, but they compound. Over time, they become stability, confidence, and emotional control. Watching this every day creates a rhythm, a mental reset, a return point. When life pulls you in different directions, this becomes the place you come back to, where your thoughts slow down and your perspective resets. It's not about escape. It's about grounding yourself before the world demands more than it should. If you commit to this daily, you won't wake up one day suddenly transformed. Instead, you'll realize you're calmer, clearer, and more intentional than you used to be. And that quiet consistency is what changes a life. Not overnight inspiration, but daily alignment. When you return to the same message each day, something important begins to happen beneath the surface. Your mind stops resisting it. At first, it listens. Then it accepts. Eventually, it integrates. This is how daily exposure turns guidance into instinct. You no longer have to remind yourself what matters. It starts guiding you automatically. Habits are not changed by intensity. They're changed by consistency. Watching this every day creates a gentle interruption to old patterns. Instead of starting the day on autopilot, you begin it with intention. The same situations that once triggered stress or reaction start to feel familiar, and familiarity brings choice. Daily listening creates a pause between thought and action. That pause is where change lives. In that space, you notice when you're about to repeat an old habit, speak from frustration, or abandon yourself for comfort. Awareness replaces impulse, and over time, awareness becomes restraint. Your nervous system also responds to repetition. Calm input trains calm output. When your mornings or evenings include grounded reflection, your body learns that it doesn't need to stay alert all the time. Tension softens, focus improves. You move through the day less reactive and more present. This is why watching something daily works best when it's quiet and steady. Loud motivation fades. Calm clarity lasts. Each time you return, you reinforce the same message. You are allowed to slow down, choose intentionally, and protect your peace. Over time, you stop needing external reminders as often. The message becomes internal. What you once watched becomes how you live, and that's when real change begins, not from effort, but from alignment. Watching this every day begins to change the way you speak to yourself, not because the words are dramatic, but because they are consistent. The voice you hear most often becomes the voice you trust. And when that voice is calm, grounded, and honest, your inner dialogue slowly follows its lead. For many people, self-talk has been shaped by pressure, comparison, and urgency. You've learned to push yourself through days instead of listening to what you need. Daily reminders interrupt this pattern. They replace harsh inner commands with steadier guidance. Over time, criticism softens into observation and judgment gives way to understanding. This shift changes how you respond emotionally. When stress appears, you don't immediately panic. When frustration arises, you don't react impulsively. You recognize the feeling, acknowledge it, and allow it to pass without letting it dictate your behavior. Emotional control doesn't come from suppression, it comes from awareness practiced. Daily exposure also reduces emotional noise. Instead of carrying every thought, you learn to let unnecessary ones pass. You stop overthinking situations that don't require your energy. This mental clarity creates emotional space, allowing you to respond with intention rather than habit. As your inner dialogue becomes steadier, confidence stabilizes. You trust yourself more because you're no longer undermining your own efforts. You move through the day with less self-doubt and more presence. The change isn't loud, but it's unmistakable. Watching this every day doesn't change your personality, it returns you to yourself. And as your inner voice becomes calmer and clearer, your life begins to reflect that same steadiness outwardly. As daily watching becomes routine, something subtle but powerful begins to change in the way you make decisions. Not in dramatic life-altering moments, but in the small ordinary choices that quietly shape your future. You begin to pause before committing. You consider how something will affect your energy, not just your schedule. This pause is where control returns to you. Before, many of your decisions may have been driven by urgency, emotion, or the desire to avoid discomfort. Daily grounding slows that impulse. You stop choosing what feels easiest in the moment and start choosing what feels right long-term. This doesn't make life perfect, but it makes it intentional. Watching this every day helps you recognize patterns sooner. You notice when you're about to repeat something that never worked before. You become more aware of when you're acting out of fear, habit, or external pressure. Awareness doesn't judge, it redirects, and redirection changes outcomes. Over time, you begin trusting your judgment more, not because you suddenly know everything, but because your mind is clearer and your emotions are steadier. Decisions feel less rushed. Regret becomes less frequent. You stop needing constant reassurance from others because you've learned to check in with yourself first. This daily practice also affects what you walk away from. You disengage from unnecessary conflict sooner. You stop investing energy where it isn't returned. You recognize that choosing peace is not avoidance, it's discernment. And discernment is a skill strengthened through repetition. Watching this every day doesn't force you onto a new path. It gently corrects your direction. Small course adjustments, repeated daily, lead to entirely different destinations. And one day, you realize your life feels more aligned, not because you tried harder, but because you chose more wisely. As you watch this every day, your relationships begin to change, not because you demand it, but because you do. When you become more grounded, clearer, and emotionally regulated, the way you show up shifts. You listen differently, you respond with less urgency, you stop explaining yourself into exhaustion. And this alone alters the dynamics around you. Daily grounding helps you recognize where you've been overgiving. You see how often you've prioritized harmony over honesty, availability over balance. Without anger or resentment, you begin pulling your energy back into alignment. You don't withdraw, you recalibrate. And this recalibration teaches others how to meet you. Boundaries start to feel natural instead of confrontational. You no longer set them from frustration, but from clarity. You say no calmly. You take space without guilt. You allow silence without rushing to fill it. Watching this every day reinforces the understanding that boundaries are not walls. They are guidelines for healthy connection. Some relationships strengthen as you become more present and less reactive. Others feel strained, not because you've changed for the worse, but because the dynamic depended on you being constantly available. This awareness can feel uncomfortable, but it is also liberating. You stop forcing connections to work at the cost of your peace. Daily reminders help you release responsibility for other people's emotions. You stop managing moods that aren't yours. You offer presence without overfunctioning. This shift brings emotional balance into your relationships, allowing connection without self-erasure. Watching this every day doesn't isolate you, it aligns you. And from that alignment, relationships become clearer, calmer, and more honest. You no longer chase connection. You allow it to meet you where you are. By the time watching this becomes a daily habit, the change is no longer something you're trying to make happen. It's something that's already happening. You may not be able to point to a single moment when everything shifted, but you feel it. Life feels less reactive. Your mind feels steadier. You're no longer pulled as easily by urgency, emotion, or outside pressure. This is what daily alignment looks like. Consistency does what intensity never could. By returning to the same grounding message every day, you've trained your mind to slow down before it spirals, to pause before it reacts, to choose before it defaults. You don't need constant motivation anymore. You've built something stronger, clarity that sustains itself. Over time, you notice how differently you move through challenges. Problems still arise, but they don't consume you. You face them with perspective instead of panic. You recover faster. You let go sooner. Watching this every day hasn't removed difficulty from your life. It has changed how much power difficulty has over you. This daily practice also reshapes your sense of identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who is always catching up, fixing things, or holding everything together. You begin to see yourself as someone grounded, intentional, and present. This shift influences how you plan, how you rest, and how you show up for the future. What makes this change last is not effort, but return. Each day you come back, you remind yourself of who you are and what matters. When life pulls you off center, this becomes your anchor. Not something you outgrow, but something you return to whenever clarity is needed. Watching this every day doesn't promise a perfect life. It offers something more valuable, steadiness. And from that steadiness comes better decisions, healthier relationships, and a calmer way of living. Over time, you realize your life didn't change all at once. It changed because every day you chose to come back to yourself.